Right now, I'm going to briefly share some history of Black people in Canada, and the history from the 1600s to the 1800s. I'm drawing on material from a woman named Lydia Smith. The 1600s. Slavery existed in Canada as it existed throughout colonies in the world. The first documented slave in Canada was named by their master, Olivier Le Jeune, in 1628. However, there are reports of slave ships arriving in early 1600s. Well, I was shocked to find out that many documented slaves in Canada were owned by clergy. It wasn't until the late 1700s that talks of abolishing slavery started in Upper Canada. Now, Upper Canada is the area including the southern part of Ontario and along the shores of the Georgian Bay and Lake Superior. The 1700s. Well, during the late 1700s in Nova Scotia, there were promises of freedom and land for Blacks in return for British loyalty. While the Black people were no longer slaves, the Black community was oppressed and denied basic civil and human rights. As a result, there was a mini exodus in the late 1700s when Black loyalists and Black refugees, the Maroons, took the offer to settle in Sierra Leone, and that's in Western Africa. The church often attempted to preach a thin Bible to Black peoples, focusing on servitude and honoring your master. But at the same time, the power of the gospel shone through the hymns of Isaac Watts in the Westlands, offering hope and empowerment to an enslaved people. In the early 1800s, Canada and the northern United States gained a reputation for being a safe haven for those who were enslaved. Many enslaved peoples traveled secretly to Canada through a concealed network known as the Underground Railroad. Many churches and Quaker meeting houses became stations on the route to freedom. There is much mythology on how people communicated with each other between these stations. Since music and spirituals were often used in Black communities to counter the theologies being preached, music seemed the perfect way to convey messages of freedom, as music was, and remains, a primary form of communication. Slavery was abolished in 1833 in the British Empire and in 1865 in the United States. Long after slavery was abolished, life still remained very difficult for Black people across North America. In the 1950s and 1960s, the fight for civil rights intensified. Several iconic moments included Viola Desmond refusing to sit in the Black-only section of the movie theater in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. Rosa Parks refusing to sit at the back of the bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and 3 civil rights marches from Selma to Montgomery. And the demolition of Africville in Halifax, Nova Scotia, that resulted in the forced relocation of the historic Black community. Many churches joined in the movement for civil rights for Black peoples, while other churches went about their daily business, warning activists to slow down and to temper their voices. When society actively put restrictions on the rights of Black peoples, saying, you cannot sit here and you can't have marches there, the church sang the African American spiritual, I'm going to live so God can use me. This past year, after the killing of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement sprang up and grew. Enough is enough. How many people have to suffer and be killed because they are different somehow? People of faith and people without faith, people of all races and nations are standing hand in hand, standing up for justice for all. For racial profiling continues to affect every aspect of society in North America, from childcare to educational and employment opportunities. It is clear that the fight for racial equality continues. It's not fair. It's not just. When we ask, why is there such injustice? The answer is actually quite complex, with historical events and fictitious theories of Black people spanning the centuries that can even shape our current unconscious assumptions. There is a growing awareness that there is many of us who are not Black do not realize what it means to be Black in North America or to have a different culture from the predominant one. A good thing that has come out of the Black Lives Matter movement is that many people in recent months have begun a process of deep listening to the experiences of those who are different. People have started reading books about the experiences of Black people and listening to Black people's stories.
Viola Desmond was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia in 1914. Upon finishing school, she opened one of the first beauty salons catering to Black people, and also launched her own line of beauty products, again specifically created for those with dark complexions. In November 1946, Viola was on a business trip to Sydney to sell her products to salons there, when her car broke down in New Glasgow. While waiting for parts to fix her car, she decided to see a movie at the Roseland Theatre. Unbeknownst to her, the theater management only sold floor seat tickets to whites, while Blacks sat in the cheaper balcony seats. Because she was nearsighted, Viola took a seat on the main floor near the front of the theater so she could see the screen. When she refused to move to the balcony, she was arrested, but not for sitting in a whites-only area. Because the provincial amusement tax on a floor seat was 3 cents, but only 2 cents on a balcony seat, Viola Desmond was charged with tax evasion. Even the judge hearing the case said, "One wonders if the manager of the theater who laid the complaint was so zealous because of a bona fide belief that there had been an attempt to defraud the province of Nova Scotia of the sum of 1 cent, or was it an abuse of the law to enforce a racist rule?" But the law was the law, and Viola was convicted. Viola Desmond's case became a flashpoint in the Canadian civil rights movement, so much so that she is often referred to as Canada's Rosa Parks. In 2010, Nova Scotia Lieutenant Governor Mayanne Francis, herself a Black woman, granted Viola a posthumous vice-regal pardon, the first ever granted in Canada. In 2018, Viola Desmond became the first woman, besides the Queen herself, to be depicted on Canadian currency.
The thing is, we can get all upset as we hear such stories and want to do things to help, but if we don't root our responses in learning some history in the case of Black people in North America, combined with some very deep listening to the Black people in North America, we risk hurting those we're trying to help by saying or doing things that end up hurting them rather than helping them. We risk being paternalistic and trying to help others in the way we think they would like to be helped, rather than standing with them and supporting them in the way they want to be helped. Deep listening can be very challenging, whether it's with someone who is Black or a First Nations person or another race or culture or social level. Deep listening can be challenging, even in our own circles of friends and family and the church, right? Here are just a few pointers for deep listening brought to you by married couple Carolyn and Tom. We're making this skit silly, but I think you'll get the points we're trying to make.
Carolyn?
Yeah?
Do you have a minute to talk? There's something we need to talk about.
Sure, you've got 5 minutes before my webinar, and that's all I've got because the rest of my day is crammed.
Only 5 minutes?
Well, yeah.
Okay. What I need to tell you is that I don't appreciate it when you...
Oh, just a sec. Yeah, okay. Yes, yeah. Oh, hi, Isabel. Good to hear you. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, right. Okay, so Stu is driving his new wheelchair at 30 kilometers per hour, and you can't keep up, so you need to know what to do. It'd be just easy for you to learn how to run and chase after him, right? Yeah, glad to help. Have a great day. Thanks a lot. Yeah, bye for now. Yeah, okay. Where were we?
I don't think that was very helpful for Isabel. And you certainly weren't listening to me.
Okay. You have 30 seconds before I have to go to my webinar. And I think I was listening to Isabel. I think I heard her fine, what she needed help with.
Well, you didn't really take the time to listen to her and actually hear what she was saying. Just like you're not taking the time to listen to me and... Okay, I guess I'll schedule a time later when you're not so busy.
I'm ready to talk now.
Are you sure this is a good time? I mean, you're here in the church and you've got your prayer shawls on.
Yeah, well, there's no time like the present to talk. And yeah, I've got 2 shawls on because it's double the holiness. You gotta give your all to God, you know.
Really? It looks like you're giving your leftovers to God.
What?
Nothing. Listen, I just want to say that it hurts me when you don't seem to take the time or the energy to listen, to really listen to what I'm trying to say.
I'm listening. I'm all ears. I'm listening. See?
Yeah, but you're not listening with an open mind because you're all agitated and upset now. And now I really don't want to have this conversation.
Well, I'm just upset. It's just that you're wrong. That's all.
We can't have a discussion if you're not going to really give me a chance to talk, even if it hurts you a bit to hear the truth, does it?
Well, maybe we could set a time when I'm awake, we could turn the phone off, and we could have a good discussion with open minds and open hearts, even if it hurts.
That sounds good. Back to the sermon now.
Deep listening is part of loving others, no matter who they are. And deep listening is what God calls us to do. In deep listening, we suspend our judgment. Judging is God's work, not ours. In deep listening, we try to really understand and hear what the other person is saying, even if it hurts. In deep listening, we will often come to a point where we can see a block in ourselves or something negative in ourselves or our culture. In the case of Black people in North America, for instance, we may see how we in our culture have wittingly or unwittingly been part of racism, and it may be a bit of a shock. So deep listening involves an openness to saying, I see that there are things in me or in my culture or in the history of our peoples that are not good. And then what do? We stick with it. We say sorry to one another where it is appropriate, and we confess our lack of loving to God. We ask for God's help and God's strength, and then you know what? The block to loving eventually disappears. Then God can work through that formerly blocked space in us that kept God's love and understanding from flowing between us and others, and God can then help us to move into a deeper, more compassionate and trusting relationship. Did you know that when there is a deep and mutual listening between people, we find that God is there too? And then out of this space of deep listening and relationship and working through the blocks to loving with God's help, that's when our words and actions can make a true difference. Because we're not doing stuff with our own energy only. Our God of love and justice is our strength and guide. So if your back gets up because a truth has been spoken, stop and pray. And let that difficult place be a place that you meet God. a place that God helps transform you and work through you to eventually bring real and lasting change into your relationships and out into the world. Let us pray. God, there is brokenness in each of us. There are blocks in each of us that prevent us from truly listening and being in a deep and trusting relationship with others. Help us to listen and learn to turn to you, that our relationships might be deepened and we might do your work in the world. And help us to practice this listening this week. Amen.